And joining me now to talk about the left's efforts to politicize the tragedy, Fox News political analyst Juan Williams, former Bush advisor, Fox News contributor, in studio tonight, rare appearance, the one and only Karl Rove. Juan, the sequester was Obama's idea, number one. Number two, the sequester had nothing to do with this, nor was it an AR-15, as the Daily News, as Diane, Feinstein, and others said. So why is there always this race to politicize a tragedy and advance an agenda?
You know, I don't think there's a race to politicize it except coming from the right, Sean. And the race to politicize it from the right is, oh, don't bring up guns, don't mention guns. Guns have nothing to do with it. This is all about the fact that this guy was a nut job. He's crazy, and that's the problem. And so let's talk about mental instability and the need for greater health care for people who are, you know, under mental treatment. But let's not talk about guns. That's the political effort.
The guy was mentally ill, number one. Number two, we know that this guy had a history. She had no business having a security clearance to the degree that he had, based on his history.
Right. And no business buying a gun. No business being able to buy a gun in this country, right?
All right. Karl Rove.
Well, first of all, the mayor of Washington, D.C. ought to be counted upon to attack the sequester, because the Washington, D.C. economy depends upon an ever bigger federal government. I thought it was outrageous. The sequester had nothing to do with the security status at the base. He had a ID. He worked on the base. He displayed his ID. He got access. Second of all, I want to correct Juan on one factual thing. It wasn't the National Rifle Association that was heard from yesterday. It was the President of the United States, Diane, Feinstein, and other advocates of gun control. The National Rifle Association has a policy on days like this of respecting the situation by not turning it into politics. And Diane Feinstein in particular was really over the top in her comments about this.
Right. Karl, let me just say something to Karl.
Juan, I didn't interrupt you. Please let me finish.
I was just going to join the conversation.
Well, okay, go ahead and join the conversation, and then I'll finish my point. Raise your hand if you want to speak, and while I'm talking in the future, and I'll respond. Okay, go ahead, Juan. 30 seconds to you.
Thank you, Professor.
And then we'll come back, and I'll finish my thought.
Yeah, sure. No, I just wanted it to be a conversation. But my point to you is the reason that the NRA didn't say anything yesterday is they knew they'd be on the defensive in the face of 12 people being dead. And every day they speak loud and clear, so loud that the Congress can't hear the American people say, what about reasonable gun control in this country?
First of all, Juan, it's nice of you to suggest that only people who don't listen, only members of Congress who don't listen to the American people oppose gun control. Maybe they're opposing gun control because that's what their constituents want them to do. And second of all, I noticed yesterday, and this was the point I was going to make, Juan, so let me finish it belatedly, if you don't mind. I think
Just raise your hand.
I think the conversation, no, it's you who raising your hand, my friend, you.
All right.
The conversation would have been different, I think, yesterday, had people stepped forward and said, you know what, this is another instance where somebody with a record of mental illness has been able to purchase a gun. So maybe we ought to focus and find common ground on what can we do as a society. We have these prohibitions in law called HIPAA, the Health Insurance Privacy Act, that keep people from being who have mental illnesses from being tagged and kept from the purchase of weapons. But again, we didn't have that.
Karl.
We got this. We got to stop having AR-15s when an AR-15 was not involved. And once again, it happens in an area, a part of the country with very serious and severe gun laws in place.
I'm raising my hand.
All right, Juan,
I'm raising my hand. Let me just quickly say, Karl, what you've got here is a situation where they don't say anything, the NRA, because they understand that reasonable, thoughtful Americans, a clear majority in all the polls, believe that you can do things that are just common sense, like expand background checks to online purchases and gun shows. You can do this.
Maybe
Americans would buy into the idea of handling psychiatric treatment as part of the larger agenda, but not by itself.
Look, I'm glad you sit in the circles, the leadership circles, the board of directors of the National Rifle Association, and can explain to us why they do the things they do. I take them at their word that they think it's appropriate on a day like this not to politicize it. And this was politicized by the President of the United States making inappropriate comments, and by Senator Feinstein immediately going out without knowing the information at hand and rattling on, and by the mayor of Washington, D.C. So, we're not going to agree on this. You think it was fine and dandy for them to do it. I don't think it is.
Question.
And most of the American people don't either.
What about the president who's making all this political hay and attacking Republicans just hours after this happens, Juan, is there not any inappropriateness there? And then we have Jay Carney go out once again. He's going to bypass Congress, and he's going to use executive orders. What he can't get done legislatively, he'll just take the power upon himself. That's problematic for something like the Constitution, you know.
Well, look, of course, look, it's not a matter of doing anything in defiance of the Constitution. I'm sure you, Sean, would be all over the president, and everybody would be, because that's just not American. What this is about is Republican obstructionism and the NRA, with all their big money, shutting people up, intimidating people, having recalls like they did in Colorado, so that the American people can't get reasonable steps to protect themselves.
If people disagree with you, it's because they've been bought off or pressured by somebody else, not that they can have a legitimate disagreement with you. And I would also remind you this. Jay Carney said the president's going to take executive action, but tonight in an interview, the president said, I have no more executive action than I can take. You may want him to take some executive action, but even the president of the United States admitted he'd come to the limits of what he could do on his own authority, and he needed the people's representatives to pass it. And the people's representatives are going to make a decision on this based on their informed opinion, not on the basis of supposed pressure.
They make a decision based on the NRA's money.
Juan, last question.
Yes.
There are real solutions about being able to, first of all, our background check system isn't working. We got 4 million people with top security clearance. Let's deal with that problem. And what about what Karl mentioned about the mentally ill? Should we have the ability?
That's fine.
Well,
let's make it a priority. Let's make it a priority. Let's not have all the rest of this stuff, which is not central to the issue here, that's going to take away the right of Americans to keep and bear arms, which is an unlimited right.
Nobody's trying to take away your guns, Karl. Don't try to feed paranoia and raise your hand when you want to speak. But I want to just finish on this point. An overwhelming majority of American people,
both of them are
overwhelming majority of American people think background checks are a reasonable step to take.
That is not accurate, Juan.
You can write a question and say, you can write it.
I've looked at them, Juan, and if you write them in a certain way which was not reflective of the legislation that Diane Feinstein and Harry Reid were pushing at all.
Are you spinning? You're spinning so fast you can't even keep straight.
He had 2 hands up. All right, we got to go.
Oh, okay. Well, all right, I'll give him that. But he's spinning, I'm telling you.
All right. No, I'm actually in agreement with him. Thank you.